Hello to all my friends and family, and welcome to Jim's 5 a.m. Club. And as you can see, I'm just in a rose garden here at the moment amongst these beautifully scented roses. I just absolutely love roses. They just take me to a place of yesteryear. I remember growing up, my mother always had roses at home, and it's just a scent which is heavenly, absolutely beautiful. Anyway, what I want to do today is just continue along my my theme that I've got for this particular week, and it's a book summary called Factfulness by a wonderful author, Hans Rosling. And the essence of this book is to alert us to the 10 key instincts that we're born with, that we have hardwired into us, that at one point in time in the history of mankind would have been useful sort of instincts to have, but with time those instincts are more working against us than working for us. So the author makes a very solid point that these 10 instincts that we have as human beings tend to distort our perspective of the world and prevent us from seeing the world in how it really is. And this distortion leads us to problems, issues, and further challenges down the track. Anyway, in a previous 5 a.m. Club, I went through each of the 10, just listing them and briefly touching on them. And what I promised to do was to go through each and every one of those 10 and do a deep dive and discuss them with a little bit more detail. So today I'm going to touch on another one of those instincts that we have, and the instinct is called the size instinct. And it's very, very powerful, very, very important to understand for young and old. So basically what the size instinct suggests, and this size instinct is even more important, more relevant today, because even though people are theoretically more educated, the fact that people don't take up mathematics now as a compulsory subject in high school, and the fact that they don't get further along the path of maths, means that we're not fully developed from a mathematical perspective. Our minds are not fully developed, which leads to problems further down the track. Well, the breeze is starting to pick up, so hopefully the acoustics won't be too affected by that. So what I'm suggesting is that as part of our growth and development, as part of our education, there are facets of education that are absolutely critical. And whilst when we're at school we don't understand how the different subjects impact our current and future lives, it's only when you get older that you realise that by not having a bent in a particular topic will disadvantage you in certain aspects of your life. And one of those aspects is mathematics and understanding proportionality and being able to measure, compare, contrast, and critically use those skills to enable us to understand the world around us. So the author says something which I believe, and I believe very, very deeply, that we have an innate tendency, should I say, to get things out of proportion. Especially now when, as I said, that maths is no longer a compulsory subject. You know, it's especially now when we've got more numbers, when we've got more information, we're bombarded constantly by statistics, by numbers, by challenges, by problems, And unless you have that capability to be able to understand and see the relativities, then you may not be in a good position to be able to estimate and determine what the right priorities are in your life. So the author says that we systematically, not just occasionally, not just every now and then, we systematically overestimate things and underestimate things. Now, you just talk to people on a regular basis, and we're all guilty of this. And I'll give you an example. We're all very guilty of this. We always underestimate how much we've eaten, unless you're writing it down, unless you're documenting it, unless you're keeping notes and being very, very diligent. We always underestimate how much we've eaten, so how many calories we take in, and we're always overestimating how much energy we've used or how much exercise we've done. I worked for years as a pricing commercial analyst, a commercial manager in an area of outsourcing, where we outsourced and priced many, many projects over the years. And it was guaranteed that when people were asked to estimate how much effort was required, how many resources were required to provide a solution, to maintain a solution, to build a product or build something, they got it wrong, not by a small proportion. They got it wrong by factors of huge proportions. They got it wrong in a big way, is what I'm trying to say. And you say to yourself, how can we get things so wrong? And the reason why we get things so wrong is that we're wired that way. We're wired to overestimate and underestimate certain things. And the author uses an example. Because we're bombarded with information and the news items, and we're surrounded by things which cause us fear, one thing that we always overestimate is the number of immigrants in various countries. Now, just think about it. Now, just because the news talks about immigrants all the time and the problems, and our parents, when they first came to Australia, we're part of that problem. People would always overestimate how many Greeks there were in Australia, or how many Greeks were in the community. As they overestimate how many Chinese there were, how many Italians there were, how many, and you look these days, in terms of how many Asians, how many people from Middle Eastern backgrounds, because it's something which snowballs, because you've got the fear on the one hand, and then you've got the media bombarding us with news items which try to push these things out of proportion, and before you know it, you think that your country is being overrun by people of different races, by people who are completely different, and as the author says, nothing further from the truth could be the reality. So the author also suggests is that when you start to combine some of these instincts, some of these things that we have, then it accentuates, it magnifies, it amplifies the fears and the challenges that we face. So, for example, if you add two instincts, the size instinct that we're talking about now, and as well as the negativity instinct, then before you know it, you'll have people suggesting that something which is mildly a problem is a national sort of catastrophe, or something which is a lot worse than what it actually is. So that's the example. That's the example that I'm trying to show, and the example that the author is trying to talk about. We systematically overestimate or underestimate things. The other thing that the author talks about here is that we systematically always underestimate the amount of progress that has happened in the world. How many people do you talk to who seem to think that things are worse today than what they used to be? But things are much, much better. We have never been safer. We have never been healthier. We have never had more opportunity in our lives. And to make another point, in terms of underestimating progress, China, for example, in the past decade or past 2 decades, has lifted 700 million. You're listening? Not 7, not 70, but 700 million Chinese have been lifted out of poverty and are now part of a middle class. They are no longer the people who are looking for food and subsistence and just getting by. They are people now who have choices in terms of where they spend their money, where they go on holidays, and it's the new consumer boom that will ensure the next 100-year boom in the world economy. Now, there are some economists who say that this economic miracle that is happening now in China is bigger, it has a bigger impact on the world than the Industrial Revolution. And yet people don't get it. They just can't fathom. They can't fathom it. And they'll identify fringe issues or other things which cloud their judgment, and all they can see is black skies ahead and recessions and economic Agamemnon. Armageddon, should I say, not Agamemnon. The poor Greek, I put him into the wrong context, but economic Armageddon. But as the author says, we've got to be careful with numbers because people haven't spent a good time of their lives becoming mathematicians and are no longer comfortable with numbers. We've got to understand that a number on its own can't be meaningful. So here are a few lessons that'll help us become more cognizant of what's happening around us. Whenever you're given a number, any number, make sure you always ask for another number. Because with another number, the first number can be compared and contrasted to. Last year, for example, during the bushfires here in Australia, some scientist went out and claimed that 1 billion or 1.5 billion or 2 billion, doesn't matter what the number is, animals were killed during the bushfires, and it was an absolute catastrophe. But he didn't make clear that 75% of that number was made up of reptiles, amphibians, frogs and lizards. But to the children of the world listening to that announcement, all their minds went to koala bears, kangaroos, platypuses. You get my drift. They were alarmed beyond belief. And nobody's come back to put that number into context, to tell people that number was, the majority of that number was lizards and frogs and things like that. But the other thing that wasn't discussed, is, 1 billion animals got lost. But how many billions, how many trillions of animals are in Australia? In order to put that number into context so that kids don't get negatively impacted and and terrorised is the word that I'm looking for. Because since then, since the bushfires, now we've had rains all over Australia in places where it didn't have fires, which means that a lot of animals, billions and billions and billions of animals, have had an opportunity to be born and to come back into old environments as well as new environments that they weren't in before, because Australia was in drought for 5 years. But nobody has that skill anymore, because if it's not bad news, it's not going to be discussed by the media. It's not going to be discussed around a dinner table at a middle class dinner party. So things to think about. So be especially careful about big numbers, because big numbers are there to alarm, but most people can't get their heads around big numbers. I'm an accountant, I'm an economist, I'm comfortable with big numbers. When I was working at Optus, I worked on a $1 billion project, and we were rounding the pricing to the nearest $1 million. So to put things into context, they're just bloody numbers. So the lesson is, when you're given numbers, any number, make sure you ask for another number so you can compare it to. You've got to ask the question whenever somebody says something or gives you a number or says something, compared to what? Ask the question, compared to what? And once you get other numbers that you can compare it to, then you can put it into perspective and then decide if it's a big number, or if it's an alarming number, or if it's something which is run-of-the-mill, or nothing to be worried about or be concerned about. The other thing that the author talks about is that when you're given a number, even if it's a big number, always ask for a number that you can divide it by, so you can get it down to a unit rate, so you can compare and contrast against other things. The other thing that we need to be aware of, that the author talks about, is the 80-20 principle, that 80% of the value will appear in 20% of the observations. There are half a dozen items on that list of 1,000 observations which have the greatest impact, which carry the greatest weight. So you need to look at those big numbers, those important numbers, and not worry about all of the numbers, because if you're worried about all of the numbers, or you get caught up with all of the numbers, you'll get caught up in analysis paralysis and you won't be able to see the wood for the trees. So the author then once again talks about being able to divide the big number by other numbers, because rates are more meaningful than a single big number, especially when we're comparing between different sized groups. So that's basically the crux of what we were discussing today, that be careful with numbers, because most people are not good with numbers. They get overwhelmed and they get scared when they hear numbers, because they're not used to dealing with them. But at the end of the day, as we say, things are never as bad as what the media portray them to be. They're never as bad as what the people around you always seem to claim, because for some reason or other, people just love to alarm people, love to get people overwhelmed, and they use numbers just to confuse the situation. And we've seen it. We've seen it over the past year. Who would have thought that come Christmas 2020, we would look over the year and see the share markets across the world at record highs? Who would have believed that the unemployment rate, is much, much lower than what it was destined to be or thought to be. Who would have thought that the economy's kicked back and we're back into economic growth? And if it wasn't for that 0.2% or 0.3% drop in the March quarter, and if I was ScoMo, or if I was the treasurer, I'd be recalibrating and rechecking those numbers. If it wasn't for that one number, that one quarter that dropped by 0.2%, then we wouldn't have had 2 quarters of economic recession, which technically kicked us into recession. So things are not and never as bad as what people always try and make them out to be. But because of negativity, because of our instincts to want to look for negative things in the world, then we tend to focus on the shit, and no wonder most people are always stressed. Anyway, I think I'll leave it there for today. So today we touched on the size instinct, and once again just suggesting and reminding us that when it comes to numbers, most people aren't good at numbers. And when it comes to big numbers, most people can't get their head around big numbers. But always, whenever somebody presents you with numbers, always ask for another number. Always ask for a number to be able to divide it by, to work out the rate per person or the rate per capita, or to break it down so that you can compare 2 different groups and see how bad things really are. So don't be overwhelmed by numbers. And as we said, most people, when it comes to numbers, can't get their head around them. And if you can't get your head around something, guess what happens? You tend to overthink things, you tend to overestimate their impact, and you tend to quote them out of context. Anyway, so another year, and as I said, people were talking about the share market crashing. It's gone to a record high. People were talking about property prices dropping by 40 or 50%, and they were talking about this drop, and they were talking with authority, which is the funny part. And you'll see, just have a look around. Property prices are holding up, and in some suburbs, they're going ahead. So don't be caught up in the BS, because we're surrounded by people who love negativity, who love spreading fear, uncertainty, and doubt, because it's instinctive. It's part of our being. We're made to be like that. And as I said, in times gone by, thousands of years ago, it would have been an advantage for your amygdala, the part of your brain, to be stimulated and to kick you into a flight or fight response. But these days, we don't have those problems. We don't have any of those sorts of challenges. So we need to be able to respond as opposed to react. We need to critically think, and we need to go through things logically, rationally, as well as instinctively, to make sure that everything is aligned, and not to be fearful, not to act in haste and to do knee-jerk reactions. Else we end up selling our shares when they're at their lowest value, or selling our properties at a price which is well below market, for fear that the prices are going to drop and economic and financial Armageddon are going to swamp us. Anyway, stay positive, stay well. To my friends and family, stay connected, stay relevant. Positive affirmation: I'm alive, I'm well, and I feel absolutely great. And let's take a couple of lessons from this wonderful book entitled Factfulness, and to be aware that there are a number of things, that there are a number of instincts that we have hardwired into our bodies, into our being, into our brains, that challenges. They create anxiety, angst, pain, suffering. So just be aware of it and fight it where you can. Push back where you can. But most importantly, be aware of it and make your friends and family aware that these things are operating in the background, and to be able to see them for what they are. Anyway, take care. Sagapao. If you're lucky, once again from Jim's 5am Club. And I look forward to coming to you again tomorrow from a different location with a different positive message, a message of empowerment to help us see through the crap, see through the bullshit, and see through the games that people play to try and knock us off guard, knock us off balance, and have us where they really need us. But no, that won't be the case, because the more we read, the more we learn, the more we share, then the better off we're going to be in terms of being able to manage, cope, and thrive in these days of uncertainty. Anyway, yasas, hatapume, bye for now, and see you later. Bye. Ciao. Yasas.